And good morning, and welcome to Issues That Matter. And I believe today's date is August 25th. I got that right. That's a good start.
Yes, sir.
And I'm pleased and proud to have as guests today two representatives from the Biddeford Police Department. Megan Lambert-Irish, welcome. Stephen Gorton, welcome.
Sir. Thank you.
Stephen is a sergeant with the police department. Megan, you are a, got to put my glasses on, opiate outreach liaison.
That I am.
And I do know from some readings and studying that I've done, research that I've done, opiate addiction is a major issue, not just in Biddeford, not just in Maine, not just in the United States, but it's a major issue globally. And I suspect strongly that there are many tentacles that are impacting that issue. And I am very pleased and proud to have you on as a guest today so that you can share your information, share your knowledge, your expertise. And why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your expertise and your training and so forth, and how you managed to become involved with the Biddeford Police Department.
Okay. So I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling with an expertise certificate in substance use. So I've been working in the mental health substance abuse field for 14 years. I own my own private practice counseling in Saco, and the Saco and Biddeford communities came together and applied for a grant last year, at the end of last year.
Yeah, the grant opportunity came up in September. We were awarded the grant in October.
And they found me in January. And I applied, and I kind of just wanted to know what they had for an idea of what they were going to do for substance use in the community. And they ended up picking me out of the applicants. So I don't think they left room for me to say no.
We wanted to make the opportunity such an opportunity that she couldn't say no, I think is what she's trying to say.
So I became the opiate outreach liaisons for the city of Biddeford and Saco. And so I help.
So you serve joint communities.
Yes.
Now, Biddeford, I suspect Biddeford and Saco are probably looked upon as being one large community, similar to Lewiston, Auburn. Mm-hmm. Back in my Massachusetts days, Biddeford, Fitchburg, not Biddeford, Portland, Fitchburg.
We share a lot of the same resources, so it just makes sense. The communities are essentially, I wouldn't say necessarily the same, but we share a lot of the same community resources. The populations are very similar, so yeah. It just made sense to combine so that we could share the resource.
What are the major challenges facing the city of Biddeford and Saco, the cities of Biddeford and Saco today?
For substance use?
For substance abuse.
People think there's like a lack of resources, but there are quite a few resources. There's a lack for people who are homeless, who are really homeless, because they need a safe place to live. And they're in our communities, there lack like sober living houses or places that shelters. Like there's only one shelter in York County, and there's the shelter in Portland. And as you can,
We have a lot more people who need shelter than we have shelter beds.
yes. So there becomes a waiting list for a shelter when you're homeless. So you're just waiting on the street.
Yep. It's in the reading that I've done and just in watching society in general, as I pointed out in the intro, it's not a local issue. It's not a state issue. It's not a federal issue. It's a global issue. And I know I mentioned the terminology competing priorities earlier, and it's racked with competing priorities. Where do you see our local community, Biddeford Saco, fitting in relative to the global community as far as the needs, the wants, the demands, to try and get your arms wrapped around the issue, which is an ever-growing issue.
Well, Biddeford and Saco are lucky in the sense of they have lots of treatment programs right in the cities. They have, it doesn't matter where you live in Biddeford and Saco, you can get to these places even if you don't have transportation. Some people can walk, they can take the bus. They have the ability to get there. And there's also, the facilities also have grant money that they can help if people can't pay, if they don't have insurance. In other cities, they struggle because they don't have the transportation. If you're living, in the middle of nowhere, you don't have a bus that comes by your house to pick you up. So
that's a factor that I dealt with back. I've spent 4.5 years with the National Able Network. The National Able Network is an organization that works with older people, 55 years of age and older, who, for whatever the reasons might be, are out of the job market and they wanted to get back in. And the Able Network would provide training and would find them locations in nonprofit organizations such as the city of Biddeford to hire these people as volunteers, what I would call paid volunteers. And one of the obstacles that we ran into had to do with transportation. If I live in Kennebunk, and I'm 5 years of age or older, and I want a job, and they have an excellent job in Biddeford Saco, but I have no way of getting there, guess what? I'm locked out of that job. Yep. And so transportation is an issue which is serious. It was then, to a degree, I'm sure it's still today, and that was some years ago.
One of the things that we struggle with in this is that a lot of times people will believe that there's no resources available. That's one of the major barriers that we have to try to overcome in some different populations when we're talking about somebody that's struggling with substance use. And certainly they see on the news often, I mean, we all see the news reports about a lack of resources. So sort of breaking down that as a barrier to you seeking treatment is one of the kind of our major things that we want to do. Because there are a lot of resources in this community. Now, could we use, could the communities, could Maine, could the nation, could there be more resources for everybody? There absolutely could be, and that would be beneficial. One of the things that we want to do is get out to as many people as possible to let them know that you can recover in this community, and there are resources available. So don't use what you see as, I don't want to start down this road, which is really, really hard, because they hear recovering from opiate addiction is really hard, and they know that they're living in that life. Don't use, I don't want to start down that road because the resources aren't going to be there for me. I'm not going to be able to get the things I need, so why start? And the answer is there are resources available, and it starts with a discussion, and there are programs, and the simplest thing to do is to reach out to Megan, or different communities have different one, but it begins with a phone call, and there are resources available. And we're very lucky in Biddeford with resources we had, including transportation. Shuttle bus has been fantastic, and we'll try to wrap around anybody's needs, whatever they are.
Megan, what do you see as some potential misreadings as to why a person becomes addicted to opiates? Is it? I suspect, and I've read that a lot of people think that it's lack of will. But the opiate drugs actually change the brain. Mm-hmm. What kind of challenges are out there in that regard?
Well, every person is individual. Like, you can't lump one person into a whole big group of people when it comes to addiction. Everybody has their own issues and their own way of becoming addicted. I think the statistic now is 5 out of 6 new heroin users have been addicted to an opiate prescription. So, they could have fallen at work and hurt their back and got a prescription for an opiate, and then got hooked, and now their prescription was taken away, or they can't pay for it, and now they're searching for something else. It could be trauma. and mental health issues. The people I deal with, I think there's about 97% of the people that I've talked to so far have some type of trauma in their history.
Now, when you say trauma, it could be an injury.
It can be, well, I mean, it's self-defined trauma, so whatever has been impactful to them, whatever has impacted their life so significantly that they still carry it with them when they come into my office.
Now, my perception, it would probably come close to that a person, and I'll be very simplistic, a person breaks their leg, significant pain, they go to the doctor gives them painkillers, they get addicted to the painkiller. OxyContin, as an example, is addictive. And some people might think that, but if they marshal up and, through willpower they can beat that. Well, the OxyContin is playing games with their mind, and they lose that willpower. I can't imagine. I could only imagine the struggle that the people have.
Well, there's many paths to if you get into substance use and addiction. I mean, that is a fairly common one that we hear, is somebody that started with an injury and a prescription. But there's, as Megan said, there's also paths through trauma, undiagnosed mental health, sometimes people treating themselves with street narcotics for undiagnosed problems. There's so many different paths to that. And then when you attach on the other side of that, the stigma that sometimes the community has. So as you said it messes with the brain. I'm no doctor, but I've gone through some conferences and they talk about how opiate addiction changes brain chemistry. So you have a physical addiction, you have your brain chemistry changing, and you have the stigma that attaches, that you hear from some of society, that it's a choice that they're making, it's a criminal choice that's against the law, they can stop if they want to, and that's not necessarily true. So then you have the kind of the shame that they feel, and sometimes that's compounded by family that knows that you can do better and that you're disappointing as well, and so you get into this isolated place where you don't think that there's any resources or any way out. And so we're trying to address that on a couple levels by giving them not only resources, but trying to get out into the community and make Biddeford specifically, in my case, but in general, recovery-friendly communities that addresses some of those stigma issues that try to understand where the people are at, meet them where they're at, and get them the resources that they need without judgment or passing judgment on them or increasing that problem.
Yep. Now, Steve, I introduced Megan, and she was the first up.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're on the hot seat now.
Yeah, that's good.
Sergeant, thank you for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity.
I can only imagine what it would be like. In my mind, I watch the news, I read the newspapers, and I hear about police officers being. I would venture to I'll coin it. There's a war going on among some people that for some reason, they just become violent with the police, and they're shooting, just random shootings for police officers, which, to my way of thinking, is ungodly. It can't be more wrong.
Right.
But I cannot imagine being a police officer, especially in a more urban, larger community, more urban community, suiting up in the morning, knowing that you're going out there into a jungle.
Yeah, I can only say that my experience, and I certainly I see the news and the news stories, and I see that the conflict is out there. But I can only relate to my own experience, and I've been in Biddeford for 21 years. I find that Biddeford is an extremely welcoming community for law enforcement. Oftentimes people come up to me and say that I can't believe you do such a thankless job. I don't find that to be the case. I mean, I think I get thanked on a pretty regular basis by the community that welcomes what we do, that sees that we're trying to improve. And I think one of the reasons that's easy for the community to see is that we do some non-traditional things here in Biddeford, like hiring an opiate outreach liaison, because I know that there's some agencies across the country that will say that, possession of substances in this manner, heroin specifically, is against the law, and we need to arrest our way out of that. Certainly, here in Biddeford, we do hold that that these things are violations of law, but we recognize the underlying issue that is contributing to that and try to address it from a different way. So that's been my experience in Biddeford. It's been a fantastic 21 years. I feel support from the community, from my command, to look at these issues, to address them, from all angles and from different angles. So I haven't had that experience that you do see on the news in different places here in Biddeford, and I think that's a credit to the community more than anything else. So.
Yep. Well, that's great. That's wonderful, and I suspect that that's probably representative of certainly the majority of the communities in the state of Maine. Thank goodness.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that I went to the academy with across the state, and I certainly don't know what their experience is specifically, but I think the experience is kind of similar to what I have. Get a lot of community support.
Where do you see it going?
So the general national conflict, where do I see that going, or
both? Break it down.
It may be above my pay grade to break down. I mean, I guess I can relate to, we talk about sometimes a loss of civility. The issues seem to be very polarizing at this point, and that the parties are far apart from each other. So my hope would be, in my breakdown, that we could be tolerant of each other's positions, that we could move to a more central point, to be more civilized in our discussions, to hear each other's viewpoints. And that's, one of the language changes for us in the department, even when it comes to this, is if we're not listening to people struggling in substance use and we're merely arresting and charging and passing them through the system, we're not hearing what the problem is, and we're not addressing the actual problem. So we're just going to have that problem again. But when you take a different path to that, hear each other's side of the story, and hopefully we're trying to do that in this, and other things too, not outside of the opiate issue. We try to do that as much as possible. Maybe, if you want me to break it down,
well,
that's how I would carry it forward.
I would be curious to hear what some of the other issues are. We focus on opiates. When we have a counselor, we focus on their expertise. But from the police officer's perspective, what are some of the other challenges that you folks are facing these days?
Well, I got to tell you, and I hate to keep kicking back to Megan just because she's here, but really I'll give it this way. The chief wanted a street crimes unit. That's my unit, so I'm in charge of the street crimes unit. His vision for that was to be very victim central. So we recognize that sort of a voice that's lost in the court system or in the police department as we go forward, because suspects have rights. We go to the court system, we go through the court system, and we deal with all the laws that may apply, but the voice that's lost in that a lot is the victim's voice. So he created the street crimes unit to be very victim oriented, to get out, to have conversations in neighborhoods, to find out what the concerns were in neighborhoods, to reach back out to victims, and I'm talking about victims of burglaries, victims of robberies, victims of assaults. The officers in the past and in the traditional model will come out and take a report, charge or not charge somebody if they have a suspect, and that case will go forward, and the victim's kind of left off to the side, wondering what's going on and not having a real voice. So that's how it started. To kick it back to where Megan's at, when he started the street crimes unit, it rapidly became connected to the opiate issue in almost every plane, on almost every level. I don't have, great statistics off the top of my head, but my personal kind of feel of the statistics would be 90% of what I was dealing with was connected in some way to addiction or to substance use. And that fans out over all of the crimes that we were investigating, looking at, being reported. So there is some substance use component or nexus in there. So if you ask, hold up the one finger and say, what is the issue? It is substance use. It is opiate addiction, and it is fanning out over all of the community and over all criminality.
Now, would you say, now I've done a series of shows, we've done a series of shows on child abuse, human trafficking.
Yep.
They're all, in some fashion, they are all interrelated.
Correct.
And it's very difficult to deal with one without it impacting another.
Well, and that's why you ask the question. I think you try to ask the question, and we were talking today about something, and you try to ask the question, come to an answer. Well, there may not be one answer. There may be a bunch of answers, but you want to at least be asking the questions of what is the underlying component to this act, and are we addressing that? And so, and that's why I've always loved Biddeford. Chief Beaupre has always been that person that wants to know what is the underlying, not the assault that's in front of you. We're investigating that, and that is what we're looking at. But what is the underlying to that? Because that's how you ensure it doesn't happen again in the future.
It's not just the behavior. It's what created that behavior to happen.
Yeah.
Which could be an opiate addiction.
And in most cases, and again, my statistics, I'm not your stats guy, but just my feel, my look of what that feels like and what that looks like to me in my 21st year and my 3rd year with the Street Crimes Unit, is that there's an underlying substance use problem. Because you talk about human trafficking and the true evil that is, and the lifestyle that becomes. Well, and then you get back when we talk about the stigma. I feel like I'm taking up all Megan's time, but we talk about the stigma. People say this is a choice they're making. Who would choose that? You just ask yourself as a rational person, who would choose to be that person? No one would. Typically, no one would. So then what's causing it? And oftentimes the answer is the underlying substance use.
Megan, what's your slant on that?
Oh, I agree with him. See, he takes up all the time, and he says my words for me.
I can feel it when I'm talking too much. Yeah, so I should stop.
He does it all the time. But no, the underlying issues are majority of is substance use. But why are you using substances to begin with? And if we have more supports, and that's where I come in, is I just don't find you substance use services. I help lay in with other supports as well to make sure that your treatment's going to be successful. And I think that's what makes me different from the other programs that was awarded grant money, is that I adapt with each of the people that come in. Like, we try to figure out, what's going to be the best scenario for them, and meeting them where they're at and saying, okay, well, if this person doesn't have transportation, I'm not going to send them to treatment that's 2 hours away where they're never going to get to it. So it's making sure that you got those supports that make people successful.
What you just touched on, I've had a series of shows with veterans. That's what veterans face. They have to go to a veterans facility, and the facility that the Veterans Society sends them to might be a couple of hours away. Mm-hmm. That creates a hardship.
Mm-hmm. And it makes people less successful because they're not gonna, if you're having a crisis in the moment, you're gonna, okay, well, let me schedule an appointment, which is now a couple weeks out, and then I'm still in crisis, and now I gotta drive 2 hours away to get my crisis handled.
Yep.
And that's not good support.
But it creates a major challenge, and is there a solution to that challenge? Is there a workable solution? Because just with the neophyte knowledge that I have, that's going to be an expensive thing to do.
One of the things too is not wasting resources. So the effective use of resources, when you're sending somebody 2 hours away, as you're talking about, or some of the other programs that aren't going to fit the person where they're at right then, you're wasting resources too. So when we talk about a lack of resources, if we're effectively using those, which is, I think, another, kind of sidebar benefit that we didn't recognize, because trying to get people help on many levels is not new to the police department. And 3 years ago, the chief and I had discussions about, what we were doing for people who were asking for addiction help. Well, the short answer was we were doing everything we could. Not unlike, and I say this going back to my entire career in Biddeford. In 1996, when I started, if somebody came in the lobby on third shift and said they were homeless and asked for help, we would have done everything we could to get them help. And that carries forward to today. So before Megan, we were doing the same things with substance use, but we were doing it without the knowledge, the professionalism that she has to identify the right service. So, while we were doing everything we could, we were wasting services because I'm just trying to get you out to anybody. Now she's trying to get you out to the right person. And I think that that's been a great change that I didn't necessarily see in the beginning, but when you're not wasting resources and you're getting them to the right one.
How did
it's
that
gonna-
come about?
Basically through the process of her sitting down in an assessment with the person when they come in and find out, exactly what is underlying, what are the needs, and this whole, kind of complex issue that makes you who you are in that moment, in that chair, and then finding out what is the right service for that. And frankly, before we would have some conversations about that, and it was mostly about what are you using, can you go someplace or do you have to stay in the community? It's on so much deeper level that she can probably talk about more than me, how you get to that core of what they need.
I think
and
he
where's
just
that
tried to
scene?
drag you into the conversation.
Passing it off because I'm talking too much.
So what I do is I have people come in and see me, and I sit them down and I ask them a bunch of questions, and do a full assessment of what their needs are, what they have at the moment, what their life looks like pretty much, and how I can help them, and what they're willing to do. Because some people want this, that, or the other thing, and it doesn't coincide with some of the treatment programs. So if you have a job, you can't go to treatment and be there 5 days a week when you're supposed to be at your job. And you still have a house to support, so you can't lose your job. So, okay, well, what can we do? That treatment program's not going to be right for you. Or that I want to go on medication-assisted treatment, and I can go tomorrow, but I'm not going to send you to detox, because if you're getting on medication, you may not need detox. And that was what he was doing, was sending everybody to detox. And
My
there
head is
isn't
spinning.
I can't have that depth of conversation. That's what we're talking about. So, yes, she just illustrated what I was trying to say.
My head is spinning.
Yeah.
And I'm no stranger to doctors. I have multiple sclerosis, and it's our system. I yearn for the old days. We had a general practitioner that you would go to, and he or she could take care of everything.
Yeah.
No more.
Yep.
No more. There were so many different moving parts, and in every moving part, somebody's getting a piece of the pie.
Yep.
And it's the expense is outrageous. It's, from my perspective, I look at it, it's no longer an issue. It's not an insurance problem. A lot of people have insurance of some type, but to access that insurance, be able to use it with the co-insurance and the deductibles and the part that they have to pick up, they can't afford it. Even with the insurance, they can't afford it, if they can afford the insurance to begin with. It's a massive issue for which there is no easy solution.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is she can have a peer level discussion with other service providers that I couldn't have had. That's a police officer talking to a substance use counselor and trying to set up services. That's not a comfortable discussion, and we certainly had them, but it's not as probably easy and free flowing as it is between two substance use, peer professionals.
Well, and at some point I knew I was going to say this. I am not a fan of one and done. I don't want this to be the one show that we have with the Biddeford Saco folks to talk about issues such as this, because the issues change. Then sometimes they can change in the spur of the moment. So I want to make sure that you folks are aware that if there's ever something that you want to get, a message that you want to get out to the community, and you think that this show can help get that message out, contact me.
Yeah, this has been, and we do look for opportunities like this. One of the things is just getting out to people. Now, again, we go back to, what are the barriers? We talk about, opiate addiction being very strong, very hard to get through. We talk about a lack of resources. One of the true barriers is getting people to us, letting them know that there are people in the community that want to help and only help. Megan is not a police officer. She's not looking to get anybody into handcuffs. She's looking to get people help.
Well, you just touched on something. Not looking to get anybody into handcuffs. I suspect that most of the police officers are not looking to get people into handcuffs.
Yeah. And that's why the department is really wrapped around this, because it is we call it tools in the tool belt for police officers. Now, they're the ones at 2 in the morning on whatever scene. They recognize the issues, and they want another tool in their tool belt. They recognize that, yes, there may be a criminal issue here that needs to be addressed, and it does. And there needs to be a consequence for that. And we still believe in that 100%. But that there's an underlying issue that's just going to bring that person back out here again unless we address it. And they want that tool in the tool belt. So
I think if my memory is correct, which sometimes it's not, that's recidivism.
yeah,
Yes.
I never try to say that in public because it never comes out right. But I'm glad you did. And I could just say yes. Recidivism. Yes, and that's ultimately, as an agency, what you're trying to impact is future criminality. Now, you got to address the moment, but we want to make sure that as we go forward, this moment, if preventable in the future, we can address that.
Very good. Now, what issues would you like? What issues are on the table that might be new and different to people today? Can you, if there are any?
What do you mean by that question? Like what?
Oh, now you're putting me on the hot spot.
I'm putting it back on you.
The world is changing quickly,
Yep.
rapidly, too rapidly. And what might you see off into the future? What things do you see bubbling up?
I don't have my crystal ball in front of me, but it's the lack of compassion for your neighbor, someone you meet on the street. Like, it's empathy for others. People are so secluded in their own lives that they've got so much stuff they're dealing with, or they're so wrapped up in technology or whatever they may be wrapped up in, they're not being able to empathize with someone who's struggling or be there for them. And that's even in your own family, friends, like, let alone a stranger that is in the need of help.
Have we become so addicted to technology? We no longer have conversation. We send out emails. We no longer write letters. We send emails. We have a whole different jargon. The language is totally different. Now, that's one of the things that I used to tell people when I was working with the older people, trying to put them in, find positions for them. You know, they would say, I'm too old. They don't want to hire me. I'm old. I said, no, you're not old. You experience. Yes, that 25-year-old might be able to dance around you on a computer, but you can write a heck of a lot better business letter. And that's what people need. That's what companies need. They don't necessarily need the speed. They need the knowledge. And the experience gives you the knowledge. That gives you a heads up. I tried to convince them to be talking like that, be thinking like that. Don't count yourself out because you're old. You're experienced. Take the word old out of your lexicon of words. If somebody asks you how old you are, number one, it's illegal. They can't do that, but some of them do. Well, change it.
Yeah,
I have 35 years of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just to jump on what Megan was saying, I think that sometimes in there's a loss of community too. And I do feel that sometime we're going to suffer for the loss of our connection to each other in this community. Because, you know, even when I started in '96, Biddeford was a very tight-knit community. And I feel some of that slipping away. And again, I hate to relate everything back to the opiate issue. But that we suffer in a loss of community in the opiate issue, in the loss of empathy, the sort of compartmentalization that everybody does, that this is them and not me. This is going on with them and it's a choice that they're making, and it's not me, it's not my family. Well, I think that there's been a significant impact to that too, because there's very few families that have been left untouched by this issue. And that loss of community that comes up can impact that stigma, and us being that recovery-friendly place that recognizes that you're going through something and we want to be there for you. And that's one of the things that we're talking about all the time out in the community, is that Biddeford wants to be recovery-friendly. We want to welcome you being healthier. And we partner with a lot of people in that, like the Coastal Healthy Communities Coalition, for building healthy communities. Because we also think that that's we talk about incarceration, we talk about treatment. We got to talk about prevention too, and building healthy communities. And I do worry about, in a technology age, that we lose community.
It's mind-boggling. It's And it just strikes me that the developers of the technology are catering to the people who are well versed in technology, and every time they make a change, they're setting other people back because they, I thought at what time I was pretty adept with computers. Now they're above my pay grade.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's supposed to save you time. It just makes your life faster. That's all technology has done for me. It's just made my life faster.
And that's a problem in the sense that we never stop to actually listen because we're always trying to solve the problem, get to the next thing, rush to the next thing, or take the easiest way out to get on to the next thing.
What's the key to slowing it down? How can we slow down the process?
Be in the moment.
But the moment can be a flash.
Right.
You're not going to last too long in a flash.
Nope.
I just go back to, I don't know the answers, I know the questions. That's all. So the answers are sometimes above my pay grade.
It's a phrase that I use frequently in talking about science, health science. The medical science has done a remarkable job at extending life. But that has created problems that we have yet to figure out. How do we afford all of these people that are living so much longer? When Social Security was first developed and passed, if you were really lucky, you lived to age 65. Now we have a significant percentage of our population that are living well beyond 65, and they're all on Social Security. Mm-hmm. That creates an affordability problem.
Yep.
And it's frightening. And there's no solution to it.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that does not give us the luxury to stop addressing it. We have to find that solution. We have to sit down with people and work out the solutions.
Yeah, and that's, I think when we get back to some of our conversations, that's what we always say. I always joke, make that joke of, I don't know the answers, I know the questions. But one of the answers I can promise you is getting the right people to the table.
I would differ with you on one thing.
What's that?
You said, I don't know the answers, but I know the questions.
Yeah.
My sense is we not only don't have the answers, we don't know what all the questions are yet.
Yeah, until we start asking some of them, and that's a great point. And I think, again, and one of the things that we do at the department that's been very beneficial for my career and my mental health through my career, that leads me to this place of feeling very welcomed and very good, is that we will ask the questions and we'll get the right people at the table and try to come up with, if not the answers, then the upper level different question that we're trying to get to. And I've always been very proud of that we just don't sit in our spot and say, we're doing our part of this. This is our piece, enforcing the law. You do look at the traditional law enforcement mandate, enforce criminal violations of the law. Well, we see our role as community caretakers, and we address that by getting the right people to the table and getting all of the, these words that I never knew before. When you go to the police academy, you don't talk about silos very often, like everybody's working in their silo, but you change your vocabulary as you move on in this process. It's been very good for me throughout my career to do that. So try to break down the silos and all be working on the problem. Now, I don't need to out Megan. I can do my law enforcement piece in this and let her do her piece in this and have the doctors do their piece and the treatment facilities do their piece.
And the important part is the meshing.
Yep.
The ability for the
network.
two separate pieces of the pie or separate pieces of the puzzle to fit comfortably.
Yep.
That's a challenge.
And sometimes territorial. Not everybody's as good at that as others, and that, this is my piece. What are you doing? What are you doing looking at my piece? I'm doing this piece. Break down some of those walls as well, some of the territorial things, and just be working on the issue together. That would be the sort of utopia that we're looking for.
You just touched on the word, utopia.
Yeah. I didn't teach me that at the academy.
There are not too many utopias.
Yeah. But if that's not what you're going for, what are you going for?
So what message would each of you like to get out to the community today? If you had one message that you would like to get out to the community today, what would that be? Megan?
Oh, it's a long message.
We have time.
That recovery is possible, that I'm here. I can help anyone who's willing to come see me to get help. I actually will help anybody who asks for help. I won't. There are some places that only do their communities. If you're calling me from anywhere, I'll help you. I've helped people from like Eastport and Holton and.
Now, you mentioned earlier, I think we were in the green room, that you have a practice outside of what you do with the Biddeford Police Department. So you're not necessarily an employee of the Biddeford Police Department. You're a paid consultant.
I'm hired by the cities themselves. I'm not
City of Biddeford, I think, is the, yeah.
and I just work closely with the police department because both police departments really care about their communities and they want to see the root of the problem being helped, because it's frustrating when you come see the same person over and over again, but you can't, their job is to enforce the law. They can't provide them with substance use counseling because they don't know what that is.
They're not trained.
No.
Yeah.
So that's where I come in and I find them treatment. So there's treatment available, there's treatment options. I'm also here for family members as well. If they're struggling talking to a family member of trying to get them into treatment, I'm here to offer suggestions, changing vocabulary on how to talk to loved ones, because, you know, most of the time if you're talking to someone you really care about, you talk through your emotions and they tend to get angry, frustrated, and it ends up being into a fight because you are caring for someone who's using substances and they get defensive and you just want them to get help and they don't see it as a problem. So I'm here to start those conversations, and that it's not going to be one magical conversation where they're like, oh, I see the light and here's treatment. Let's go get treatment because you told me to.
Don't we wish it could be like that?
Then I'd be out of a job, no. Yes, but you know what? I'm okay with that. If that was the case, I would be okay. But that's not the case. So that's why I'm here, is to, so I can educate families as well and what to look for if you think someone is struggling with substance use. So I'm not just for the person who's struggling with substance use. I'm here for families as well, for education piece and friends. And so reaching out, starting a conversation, having those difficult ones.
I want to ask Stephen a question, but I want Stephen to take note that I did not address him as Sergeant.
I appreciate it.
That was a correction that he made to me in the green room.
Well, just for clarification, we want to be seen as approachable, and sometimes when you put titles in front of that, there's a formality that we don't necessarily want to stand on. And if you're coming to me with the next question of what the one thing I would say is,
yes,
call. So she had a lot of words.
Yes.
My one thing that I would get out as a message is call. If you know someone, if you are someone, call and begin the conversation, and the rest of it we can work out or work through or work with, but begin the conversation, take a step down the path.
That was a topic. That was a subject that came up on one of the shows that we did on child sexual abuse. You know, that's a major difficulty.
Cool.
If you suspect, but you don't know, but you suspect something is going on within this family structure, what do you do?
Call.
You call.
Yeah, yeah. Everything else could, because and we run into
that's a logical thing to do, but it's not always easy thing. It's certainly not the easy thing to do.
I can't help or impact or investigate or help you get treatment for 100% of the calls I don't get. So I can't do anything about 100% of the stuff I don't know. It all begins with a conversation on some level, some step down the path. And whether you're talking about investigations, and I do know that there's a process that goes on in community members' minds that say, you know, I don't know who did this. Are the police going to care? Or the person struggling in substance use, there's no treatment. You know, I'm not going to be able to access any of it, so why start? The answer to all of that is call and work with, through, together, and move forward. because it starts with that one step.
I suspect there's a lot of people out there, and I might be one of them, that never really perceived a police organization that much involved in non-criminal activities. It's great to see.
Yeah.
It's great to hear. I think as the clock moves forward, I think it's going to have very positive impact.
Well, and we have this conversation quite a bit, and sometimes in Augusta, sometimes in front of legislative committees. What is law enforcement's role in this? And again, I've been very, very happy in Biddeford with the role that we've taken, this very proactive role. But we have the role anyway. And so I get that a lot of people don't recognize all of the other things the police are doing, because what is the very visual face of the police department is a car with blue lights on it, in a black and white car. But that's just the visual face of it.
I've noticed that a lot of communities have gone away from the black and white, now there's blue.
Well, I like the black and whites.
and
I'm a traditionalist in that way,
A
but
lot of all-terrain vehicles.
I will submit, getting back to the original point, that the issues exist anyway, and we've spoken in Augusta about this very thing, is that you don't necessarily want law enforcement involved in treatment, and I agree 100%. But law enforcement will be a point of contact, and one of the things Megan says from time to time, probably bad to speak for her since she's right there, but the level of referral that she's able to get from law enforcement has been greater than any other time in her career, she said to me. Because law enforcement will come into contact with about 100% of the untreated population on different levels. And then I'll spin back to when I say that 90% of, or at least my perception, 90% of what I'm dealing with has this base in addiction or in substance use. Then we are already dealing with it. We just may not be dealing with it well. And if you listen, like Sheriff King says, that 33% of his jail are there on directly drug charges, and between 75 and 80% of his jail are there on charges relating to drugs. Well, it's not that big a leap of faith to think that we are dealing with it in law enforcement, all of these issues that we talk about. Let's just deal with them well, deal with them appropriately, and with existing community resources who are also dealing with them, maybe not as well as we could together.
Now, you mentioned earlier how many years you've been doing this.
Yeah.
Think back, if your memory banks can go back that far.
Yesterday, I hope, is as far as we're going.
Think back, did you ever think, when you started out as a police officer, did you ever think that you would be embroiled in subjects that we're talking about today?
It's one of the things that I say, if you went back to 96, and I was a military policeman in the Army before that, so if you went back to that time and said, and you asked the young me, what's law enforcement's role in mental health? We don't have a role in mental health, I would have said. That is untrue. That is not a depth of knowledge that I possess now, because 100% of the untreated, whatever it is, and it could be mental health or substance use, will be visited upon the community and will be law enforcement's role on some level. So to address that properly, you can either just simply deal with what's in front of you, or try to get to the underlying cause of that. And I certainly have appreciated that we've taken the latter and tried to get to the underlying cause of that from a mental health standpoint on my own, and that we're trying to. I like to feel impactful, like we're doing something, like we're part of the solution, and that's been a good.
Is there anything that either one of you would like to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, I want to extend an invitation to both of you, or anybody else in your organization, in the police department, or in the service providers, that I want this show to be a part of the solution. I don't want it to be a part of the problem. I don't want it to be just a talking point. I want the show to be able to actually participate in whatever way we can to help you folks get the message out, because it's an important message to get out there. And it impacts so many different levels, at so many different levels. And we touched on very briefly some of them: human trafficking, which is an incredible injustice. And I think people, even myself, not putting me on a higher plane, no. or lower plane. I don't know, whatever. But you talk about prostitution as an example. A lot of prostitutes are being trafficked. They're trapped up here. They're sold a bill of goods that you're gonna get wealthy. No.
You're gonna get your drugs. Most of them, you can't. I mean, they have substance use issues. Like I say you can't. Not many people choose that profession because they think they're going to get rich off in what they're doing. They're doing it to supply their habit. They get conned into saying, okay,
Yeah.
well, I will supply your habit, and your habit there, your addiction is what gets you into that vicious cycle, and they can't get out of it because then what's left? They're going to be sick. They're going to be without anything, and that's where you come see me, and I get it.
I don't live in the Biddeford-Saco community. I live in Kennebunk. But having the knowledge of what you folks are doing up here in Biddeford and Saco, and I suspect they're probably doing very similar things down in Kennebunkport, it gives me an enhanced view of what the realities are. It has broadened my understanding, and I sincerely appreciate you folks coming in today to talk about it, and I look forward to the next opportunity that we might have. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show. I found it very enlightening. And when you face the challenges of today, keep in mind, simplify your life. Life is too complex these days. We touch on the complexities today, and it's a lot more complex than what we've touched on. But have a great day. Enjoy the weather. It's a beautiful day out there. Thank you. God bless.